Adrian Newey's contract could have a clause that would affect Red Bull big time. Ferrari has its eyes set on Newey but could face a huge hurdle, and Mercedes has very ambitious upgrades for this week's race. Let's get straight into the latest F1 news. If Adrian Newey were to leave Red Bull, Ernest Noors, a former Ferrari engineer, believes that he could potentially take with him all the ground effect aerodynamic insights possessed by Red Bull. This belief stems from the fact that Noors doubts whether Newey's contractual agreement includes a provision for a gardening leave period, given his prominent role as the expert in ground effect aerodynamics. Avoiding such a period would not be an easy task. Newey, who achieved world titles and constructors' championships during his stints at McLaren and Williams, joined Red Bull Racing in 2006. Since then, his car designs have secured 7 drivers' championship titles and 6 team trophies. This year, the RB20 is well on its way to adding an 8th drivers' championship and a 7th team victory to that list. However, it is plausible that the RB20 could be Newey's final design for Red Bull. Reports suggest that both Aston Martin and Ferrari have made lucrative offers to entice the design maestro, while Damon Hill believes McLaren, a team on the rise, could be his next destination. For any team pursuing Newey's services, the main concern would be the possibility of a 6 to 18-month hiatus during his gardening leave, as it is often referred to. Nonetheless, Newey's exceptional talent and the high price tag associated with acquiring him have led Noors, a former F1 engine engineer at Ferrari, to speculate that the British designer might have found a way to circumvent the gardening leave clause in his contract. "It is not something that is easy to avoid," explained Noors, who has gone through such a period himself during an interview with Racing News 365. Especially for individuals of lesser importance, like in my case, signing a contract with a team doesn't provide much leverage to refuse or negotiate the gardening leave period. The restrictions can be quite significant. For a top-notch designer like Newey, I can imagine that when he joined Red Bull, he made it clear that he would not accept a gardening leave and preferred to have the freedom to determine when he resumes his work. Of course, it's always possible to challenge it legally, which is what I did in my case. It's a somewhat peculiar provision in employment contracts because it effectively prevents you from carrying out your work. Various general regulations, including those outlined in European law, offer opportunities to contest it and potentially turn it into a legal matter. Former Ferrari driver Ivan Capelli has recently shared his thoughts on the possibility of Adrian Newey leaving Red Bull and joining Ferrari. Newey is considered one of the most successful F1 designers of all time, having produced title-winning designs for the likes of Sebastian Vettel and Max Verstappen, with his cars claiming a combined total of more than 200 race wins and 12 drivers and 13 constructors' world championships. Earlier this week, there were widespread reports that Newey has signaled his intention to leave Red Bull. The rumors suggest that he has received lucrative contract offers from Aston Martin and Ferrari, with whom he has been frequently linked over the course of his illustrious career. Capelli worked with Newey at Leighton House, where the technical guru began his F1 career before achieving success with Williams and McLaren in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Speaking to La Gazzetta dello Sport, Capelli believes it is unlikely that Newey will join Ferrari unless the team offers him a financial proposal that would put anyone to shame. Despite the rumors, Newey's genius was clearly demonstrated with Red Bull's decision to pursue a new concept with this year's RB20 car, which is a significant departure from its predecessor, which won all but one race in F1 2023. Capelli praised Newey's wealth of experience, knowledge, and organizational skills, saying that he is a man with 40 years of experience and an ability to evaluate his work in a very aseptic manner. In summary, Newey's potential move to Ferrari would see him form an F1 super team with 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, who announced in February that he will join the prancing horse on a multi-year contract from next season. However, it remains to be seen whether Ferrari will break the bank to lure Newey from Red Bull. Mercedes, the Formula One team, experienced a setback during the Chinese Grand Prix sprint when they opted to make a setup change that backfired. The team had qualified in second place and finished in the same position during the sprint race. However, they were then relegated to 18th place in the qualifying race before finishing 9th. The reason behind this was the change in the parc ferme regulations for 2024, which allowed teams to make setup changes between the sprint race and the Grand Prix qualifying race. Mercedes tried to target more performance by going in a different setup direction, but it proved detrimental to the car's performance. Historically, the parc ferme regulations locked in the car's setup after the first practice, and no further changes were permitted throughout the weekend. However, the new regulations allowed teams to experiment with different setups during the sprint race and then tweak them for the Grand Prix qualifying race. Unfortunately, Mercedes' experiment failed to deliver the desired results, and they learned a valuable lesson from the experience. Mercedes' technical director, James Allison, acknowledged the lesson learned and said that the team would approach the upcoming Miami sprint differently. He emphasized that Miami is a different track from the Shanghai International Circuit, and the car's requirements would be different. The team has to ensure that they do not make the same mistake again. Allison suggested that the team should be ambitious during the sprint running and try the more drastic setup experiment in that race. He added that the team should then tune it down for the Grand Prix qualifying race instead of the other way around. This approach would help the team land the car in a better position. Mercedes has fresh updates for the W15 in Miami, and Allison is hopeful that these updates will help the team make a step forward in terms of performance. He revealed that the team has upgrade packages and components that would rectify the underlying balance that was causing them difficulty. The team's goal is to improve the car's setup and bring it to a better place, given the challenging grid and the close battle in qualifying race. Allison acknowledges that the team is facing an uphill task, but he remains optimistic that they will make progress in the coming races. The introduction of new ground effect regulations in F1 2 years ago has been a major challenge for Mercedes' performance, and the 2024 season has been no exception. In the first 2 Grand Prix of the season, Hamilton described his W15 as an amazing car. However, he later admitted that he was the least confident ever in this machine after free practice at the Australian Grand Prix. Despite achieving his best feeling of the year on Friday in Japan and finishing second in the Chinese sprint, Hamilton was knocked out in Q1 at the same circuit. Although he has shown glimpses of speed, the 7-time world champion is yet to finish a Sunday F1 race in the top 6 this season. Despite this, Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff is confident that Hamilton will remain diligent for the remainder of the campaign. He believes that Hamilton will continue to work on his morale and that of the team, even if the results don't come. Moreover, Wolff is convinced that Hamilton's working relationship with teammate George Russell will remain strong. Hamilton himself reiterated his commitment to Mercedes, stating that he is focused on finishing the current season on a high note rather than his upcoming move to Ferrari. The Briton has acknowledged that the team is going through a difficult phase and that his main challenge is to figure out how to get Mercedes back to the top. Hamilton is determined to work with the team to give better debriefs and direction, which will help them to fight back at the front. As a competitor first and foremost, Hamilton's ultimate goal is to win, and he believes that thinking about the next year won't help him achieve that. The Maranello team has generally performed better than the rest in the first 5 races of the 2024 season. They were the only team, aside from Red Bull, to win the Australian GP, thanks to Carlos Sainz's impressive victory. However, in the last race in China, McLaren's Lando Norris had the advantage. He was the closest competitor to Max Verstappen and finished second. Both Ferrari drivers, Charles Leclerc and Sainz, had a challenging weekend and ended up in 4th and 5th place, quite far behind. When asked whether Ferrari had fallen behind compared to McLaren in China, Vasseur expressed his belief that the difference between the two teams will depend on how well they can maximize their car's performance on each track. He thinks there isn't much to choose between them. Vasseur mentioned, "I believe it's a matter of a small fraction of a second, maybe even half a tenth. In Melbourne, for example, we finished the race with an 8-second advantage after 60 laps. It's really about getting the most out of what we have." He further explained, "In all honesty, we're talking about development. Firstly, as a team, we need to maximize our current potential, and unfortunately, we didn't do that this weekend. The situation doesn't shift dramatically from one weekend to another." Vasseur noted that various factors such as the specific track and the condition of the tarmac can play a role. He also felt that the format in China made it challenging to gauge the situation accurately, as they used soft tires during Friday's practice session and then switched to mediums for the race, with only a single lap on mediums during qualifying. He emphasized, "This understanding or approach to the situation can ultimately make a difference because we're talking about a minimal gap of 1/10, not half a second." Vasseur pointed out that the tightly contested group of cars chasing Verstappen has made it difficult to have a normal weekend and gain a clear picture of which team is leading. He stated, "There hasn't been a typical weekend. It's still early in the season, and the competition is incredibly close. Perhaps Max is occasionally a bit faster, but we have a pack of 6 or 7 cars within 1/10 of a second. This means that even minor details can make you go from being a hero to zero. Starting from 9th position makes the race much more challenging due to the dirty air during the initial laps. Even if you're faster, overtaking becomes difficult because, without a significant gap, you end up damaging the tire in the first 10 laps, which affects your performance later on. Vasseur concluded, "It truly comes down to putting everything together. We didn't have a flawless weekend, and collectively, we made too many mistakes. Within this group, if you don't execute a perfect performance, you won't be at the front." Red Bull's Helmut Marko is on the hunt for the next Formula One superstar to lead the team once Max Verstappen departs. As the head of Red Bull's junior program, Marko is known for his ability to uncover top talent like Sebastian Vettel and Verstappen, but he is now faced with the task of finding someone who can fill the shoes of Red Bull's current star driver, Verstappen. Despite his success with Red Bull, Verstappen is reportedly considering his future with the team, given the off-track drama that has been surrounding the team lately, including the Christian Horner investigation and Adrian Newey's potential exit. As a result, Marko is exploring the possibility of recruiting talent from outside of Red Bull's pool of drivers. One option on Marko's radar is McLaren's Lando Norris, who signed a multi-year contract extension with the team in January 2021 that will keep him with the team until 2025 and beyond. However, Marko believes that Norris could be an interesting option for Red Bull in the future, given his impressive performances in Formula One. Another driver that Marko has his eye on is Oscar Piastri, an Australian driver who is currently racing for McLaren. Piastri signed a multi-year contract extension with McLaren, which will keep him with the team until at least the end of the 2026 season. Despite this, Marko believes that Piastri is a talented driver who could potentially lead Red Bull in the post-Verstappen era. While Marko acknowledges that both Norris and Piastri are not currently available for recruitment, he remains optimistic about the possibility of signing them in the future. He also admits that Red Bull may need to look outside of its own pool of drivers to find the next superstar for the team. In addition to exploring the option of signing Norris and Piastri, Red Bull is also being linked to Ferrari's Carlos Sainz. Marko has confirmed that Red Bull is in talks with Sainz, who is having his strongest season in Formula One. However, the team is aware that Sainz has received a very lucrative offer from Audi, which could be a potential obstacle to signing him. Despite the challenges that lie ahead, Marko is confident that Red Bull will continue to be a competitive force in Formula One, with or without Verstappen. "We still know him from the Toro Rosso days, even back then. He was a driver we were interested in. He's a great talent," Marko said, referring to Sainz, who drove with Max. "But it really hurt him back then when we at Red Bull relied on Verstappen and not on him." The latest sprint format in F1 was first introduced at the Shanghai round, with the restrictions on parc ferme relaxed between the 2 Saturday sessions. This change allowed teams to experiment with different setups during the shorter races, particularly for those starting outside the top 10 on the grid. However, in practice, the changes that could be made were still limited, and competitors were unable to make significant adjustments compared to the main race. Aston Martin performance director Tom McCullough noted that many discussions were held before the event regarding setup changes such as rear wing levels. However, the 19-lap sprint stint was still challenging, and teams could not make any significant changes. McCullough added that the changes made by F1 teams in China between the sprint and GP races were relatively more significant than adjustments made elsewhere to improve in-race tire wear for longer contests. This was due to the Shanghai track's altered surface and teams lacking data with the new ground effect cars for that venue pre-weekend. McCullough mentioned that the teams simulated and prepared for the event, but the track grip was worse than in the past, making the race more rear limiting. Therefore, the teams had to make necessary changes to the cars to adjust to the new conditions. However, these changes were not significant, and every team in the pit lane would have made similar changes. Haas's Nico Hulkenburg had the most dramatic setup adjustment results turnaround during the Shanghai weekend. According to Haas team principal Ayao Komatsu, Hulkenberg's sprint setup made the car worse, and he fell from starting 13th to finishing last in the sprint race. However, the team was able to go back to a proven arrangement, and Hulkenberg scored a point in the GP race. McLaren team boss Andrea Stella believes that the reopened parc ferme will certainly be used for tuning the balance of the car. The change allows teams to adjust the ride height or balance of the car based on the tire behavior if necessary. Stella adds that the possibility of reopening parc ferme after the sprint makes the weekend slightly more forgiving, as teams can compensate for any errors in the setup. This, in turn, allows teams to be more aggressive initially in terms of ride heights and direction. From an engineering standpoint, Stella finds this aspect interesting, as it provides an opportunity to fine-tune the balance of the car. Recently, Lance Stroll's seat was put at a big risk. Watch this video next to understand what is going on at Aston Martin.